The air was thick with mist as it curled around the cobblestone streets of London, the city cloaked in an eerie calm that only seemed to heighten the feeling of dread that had settled over Blackwood Manor. The mansion stood at the end of a long, winding road, its looming silhouette partially obscured by thick fog, casting long shadows across the estate's grand facade. Blackwood Manor, an aristocratic relic of an older time, was known for its lavish parties, opulent gardens, and the occasional whisper of scandal. But tonight, it would be known for something much darker. In the opulent ballroom, guests mingled, in their finest attire, the sound of clinking glasses and soft laughter filling the air. The Royal Diamond, an ancient and priceless heirloom of the British monarchy, had been brought to Blackwood Manor for a special unveiling. The diamond, a jewel as old as the monarchy itself, had long been kept in the royal vaults but had recently been made available for public display as part of a charity event. Margaret Blackwood, the widow of the late Sir Edward Blackwood and the lady of the house, had hosted the event. She was known for her grace and poise, admired for her dedication to charitable causes, and her effortless ability to blend with the social elite. Tonight, however, her efforts to create an evening of elegance would soon be overshadowed by an unimaginable crime. The discovery it was almost an hour into the event when the guests first began to notice something was amiss. The music had faded into a faint hum, and the chatter had dulled, replaced by the rising panic of whispered conversations. The Royal Diamond, which had been proudly displayed in the center of the ballroom, was now gone. The realization came suddenly, almost as if the jewel had vanished into thin air. A shrill cry echoed through the room as the maid discovered the empty display case. The velvet curtains that draped the sides of the case were undisturbed, and the lock remained intact. It was as if the diamond had simply evaporated, but no one could fathom how. The room descended into chaos. Guests rushed to and fro, eyes wide with fear and disbelief. Lord Edward Thornton, a prominent member of the royal family, stood frozen in the center of the room, his face pale with shock. He had been one of the key figures overseeing the display of the diamond and had promised its safety to the public. The police were summoned immediately, but it was clear that the theft had been carefully planned. The work of someone with both access and knowledge of the diamond's intricate security arrangements. The room was sealed off, the guests detained, and no one was allowed to leave. It was in this atmosphere of tension and confusion that Hercule Poirot, the renowned Belgian detective, was called to the scene. Poirot arrived at Blackwood Manor late that night, his small frame stepping out of the carriage with deliberate grace. His suit was immaculate, his boatie perfectly tied, and his mustache carefully groomed. He was a man who exuded quiet authority, his every movement measured and precise. Despite the panic that seemed to ripple through the estate, Poirot remained calm, almost detached from the surrounding chaos. The police officers were already present, and as Poirot entered the grand hallway of the mansion, he was greeted by Inspector Hayes, who had been tasked with overseeing the investigation. "Monsieur Poirot, I am glad you could make it so quickly," Inspector Hayes said, his tone respectful but tinged with anxiety. "As you can see, we are dealing with quite a situation. The Royal Diamond, the centerpiece of tonight's event, has vanished without a trace. There are no signs of forced entry, and the guests are, well, none too pleased." Poirot raised an eyebrow, his gaze sweeping over the guests gathered in the ballroom, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. It was an elegant cena room filled with grand furniture, chandeliers, and priceless works of art, but now it was tainted with confusion and fear. "Indeed," Inspector Poirot replied, his voice calm and measured. "It is a most curious situation. Tell me, what have you discovered so far? What is the state of the crime scene?" Poirot examines the scene. Poirot made his way to the center of the ballroom where the empty display case stood. The glass was pristine, the velvet lining untouched. There was nothing out of place, no sign of a struggle or forced entry. He circled the pedestal slowly, his eyes scanning every detail. His sharp mind was already piecing together the puzzle, though he could not yet see the full picture. As Poirot stood there, his gaze fell upon the guests, who were still whispering nervously to one another. Some looked shaken, while others seemed more composed, though the underlying anxiety was palpable. Poirot knew that one of them must be involved. Their reactions would be key to unraveling the mystery. Then, as he took another step toward the empty pedestal, something caught his eye. A single black rose was lying at the foot of the pedestal. It seemed out of place in the grand setting of the ballroom, a symbol that did not belong. The black rose was a rare and unusual flower, often used in symbols of secrecy and death. Poirot's mind raced. The presence of the black rose could not be a coincidence. It had to be a clue. But what did it mean? Was it an intentional message left by the thief, or was it simply a sign of something far darker? The first clue, a mysterious letter, continued his examination of the ballroom. He noticed a piece of paper partially tucked behind the velvet curtains of the display case. His sharp eyes immediately recognized it as something significant, a torn letter, its edges frayed and its ink smudged. Poirot carefully retrieved the paper and unfolded it, his fingers brushing the fragile surface. The letter was brief, written in a hurried, almost frantic hand. The contents were cryptic. The diamond will be gone before midnight. The black rose will signify the end. You will find what is left behind. Poirot's gaze lingered on the letter, his mind racing. The message was clear. The thief had planned the heist well in advance, and the black rose was part of the plan. But who was the sender, and what did they mean by the end? Was there more to this theft than just the jewel? Questioning the guests. Poirot's mind sharpened as he realized the importance of questioning the guests. The theft had to be an inside job, someone with access to the diamond and the opportunity to steal it without being detected. Poirot began to systematically question the guests, looking for inconsistencies in their stories and behavior. First, he approached Lord Edward Thornton, the host of the evening. Thornton's face was pale, and his eyes darted nervously around the room. He was clearly shaken, though not entirely surprised by the crime. Monsieur Thornton, Poirot began, his voice soft but firm. I understand this is a difficult time for you, but I must ask, did anyone seem particularly interested in the diamond tonight? Did anyone behave suspiciously? Lord Thornton hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the question. I don't know, Poirot. The guests were all friends and family. We've held events like this before. I never imagined something like this could happen. Poirot's gaze remained fixed on Thornton, sensing the man's reluctance to provide more details. But before he could press further, Felicity Blackwood, Margaret's niece, approached him. She appeared distraught, her hands trembling as she clutched a glass of champagne. Monsieur Poirot, I don't know what to say, she stammered, her voice quivering. Aunt Margaret was so excited about the event, and now this terrible thing has happened. I can't believe it. Poirot studied her for a moment. Her distress seemed genuine, but there was something about her reaction that felt off. Her eyes darted nervously around the room, avoiding direct eye contact. Poirot made a mental note to speak with her more thoroughly later. The first theory. As the evening drew on, Poirot's mind began to form a clearer picture of the crime. The black rose, the cryptic letter, and the strange behavior of the guests all pointed to something deeper than a simple theft. This was no ordinary robbery. It was part of a larger, more sinister plan. Poirot's first theory was that the royal diamond had been stolen as part of a scheme involving blackmail. The letter found at the scene had referenced a deadline before midnight, suggesting that the thief had a specific motive and a timetable. The black rose, a symbol often associated with death or secrecy, could be a signature left by the thief, or perhaps an indication of a greater threat. Poirot knew one thing for certain. The theft of the royal diamond was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. As he stood in the grand ballroom, surrounded by the anxious guests, Poirot felt the weight of the mystery press down on him. The game had begun, and the only question left was, who would be the first to slip up and reveal the truth? The next morning, the gloomy weather continued, with London's persistent fog cloaking the streets in an eerie silence. Wyndham Manor, the setting of last night's high-profile theft, still echoed with the remnants of chaos. Guests had been sent home, but whispers of the crime reverberated through the air. The royal diamond, one of the greatest jewels in the monarchy's history, had vanished without a trace, leaving the hosts and all those present shaken to their core. Yet Hercule Poirot, having spent a restless night reflecting on the case, was already on the move. His mind worked in the way it always did, meticulously and with precision, piecing together each fragment of the puzzle. By dawn, Poirot was ready to get to work. The game had just begun, and he would be the one to outmaneuver his unseen adversary. Poirot's first inspection. Poirot arrived at Wyndham Manor shortly after sunrise. The morning fog lingered in the air, giving the mansion a haunted look, and as he walked through the ornate grand doors, the sense of unease inside was palpable. The ballroom, once vibrant and alive with music and laughter, now stood in mournful silence. The guests had all departed, and only a few staff remained, still cleaning up the remnants of the evening. The opulent surroundings, with their gleaming marble floors, gold-framed portraits, and gilded chandeliers, felt empty and hollow now, as though the jewel that had once been the pride of the evening was the only thing worth preserving. Poirot made his way to the display case where the royal diamond had once rested. He carefully examined it, inspecting every inch. The glass case was still locked, the velvet lining undisturbed, and no sign of forced entry could be found. The smooth metal and the carefully placed velvet spoke to the skill with which the diamond had been housed. Whoever had taken it had known exactly what they were doing. It wasn't a simple theft. It was a crime executed with deliberate care. Poirot paused, his sharp eyes narrowing as he surveyed the area. The room was still abuzz with quiet murmurs among the staff, some of whom seemed to cast furtive glances in his direction. It was in these moments, when everyone believed they were safe, that Poirot knew the most critical details often hid in plain sight. The black rose, the only clue left behind, still lingered in his mind. Poirot had studied it last night, and its meaning was clear. It wasn't a mere symbol of death, but something far more specific. It was often used in rare circles to mark an individual's involvement in something secretive or illegal. To some, it represented a warning, while to others, it was a sign of something far more insidious. As Poirot stood, contemplating his next steps, Inspector Hayes entered the room. The inspector was still uneasy, his stiff posture betraying his growing frustration. The case had left him in a state of confusion, but Poirot's calm demeanor provided him with the hope that someone with an experienced eye might be able to crack the case wide open. Monsieur Poirot. Hayes greeted him, his voice edged with both respect and concern. "I'm glad you could make it so early. I've reviewed the scene myself, but I still can't make sense of it. The diamond was in a locked case, and no one seems to have seen anything suspicious." Poirot turned to face him, his face composed. "I am pleased to assist. Inspector, you are correct, this is no ordinary theft. The criminal knew exactly what they were doing, but we must not make assumptions based on the evidence. We must look beyond the surface." Hayes nodded, eager to follow Poirot's lead. "What do you suggest we do next, Poirot?" Poirot's gaze swept over the room once more. "I shall need to speak with the guests, the people who were closest to the diamond that evening. The more I understand about their behaviors, the more I will be able to discern the truth." Questioning the key suspects. Poirot's first set of interviews was with Lord William Blackwood, the victim's brother-in-law, and Felicity Blackwood, the niece of the deceased. Both had been present in the ballroom when the diamond disappeared, but neither seemed to be able to offer much in the way of useful information. Lord William Blackwood, a man of stature and poise, greeted Poirot with a mixture of respect and anxiety. His normally calm demeanor was visibly shaken as he sat in the study, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Monsieur Poirot," Lord William said, his voice steady but betraying an undercurrent of worry, "I trust you will find the truth behind this terrible event. The royal diamond was not only a family heirloom but a symbol of our family's legacy. We've spent generations protecting it, and now it's gone." Poirot studied him carefully. "Tell me, Lord William, what did you see that night? Were you near the display case at any point?" Lord William's gaze flickered slightly. "I was standing near the bar, talking to some guests. I didn't approach the display case until much later, after the theft was discovered. I'm afraid I don't know much more, Monsieur Poirot. This whole ordeal is a shock." Poirot remained silent for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as he noted Lord William's discomfort. "And your interactions with the guests, did anyone seem overly interested in the diamond that evening?" Lord William hesitated before replying. Felicity was quite taken with it. She couldn't stop talking about the jewel, its history, and its value, but she was excited, as any young woman would be in the presence of such a rare gem. Poirot's mind immediately began to connect the dots. Felicity's fascination with the diamond could be more than just idle curiosity, but first, he would need to speak with her. Felicity Blackwood, a nervous gaze. Felicity Blackwood, a young woman of about 25, had the appearance of someone who had seen much of the world but still held a sense of naive charm. Her eyes, however, betrayed a nervousness that Poirot was quick to notice. When she sat down across from him, she clasped her hands tightly, her fingers trembling slightly. Her movements were quick, almost restless, as though she wanted to be somewhere else. "Monsieur Poirot," Felicity said, her voice quivering with emotion, "this whole situation is beyond me. I can't understand how this could have happened." Poirot watched her carefully. "And what did you notice that evening, Miss Blackwood? Did you see anything unusual? Anyone acting suspiciously near the display case?" Felicity's eyes flickered with uncertainty. I don't know. I was near the front of the room, speaking with some of the other guests. But I did notice someone lingering by the display case earlier. It was a man. He was wearing a dark suit and didn't seem to fit in with the others." Poirot leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Did you see this man leave the area?" Felicity shook her head. No, I didn't, but I remember seeing him looking at the diamond for a long time, just standing there. Poirot made a mental note of this strange encounter. He needed to learn more about this mysterious man, a new lead. The mysterious man. Poirot's next move was clear. He would need to speak to the guests who had been in the area near the display case. The man in the dark suit had intrigued him, and, if Felicity's description was accurate, this could be the key to unraveling the theft. As Poirot continued his investigation, he also examined the guest list. One name stood out: Victor Beaulieu. He had arrived later in the evening, and his connection to the Blackwood family was unclear. Poirot knew that Beaulieu had the perfect opportunity to slip unnoticed into the scene. The mystery surrounding his late arrival, combined with Felicity's description, meant that he was likely the next person Poirot needed to question. An unexpected l'audace. Poirot sat in his study later that day, examining the guest list and financial records. Something unexpected caught his attention. A letter, sent to the Blackwood estate, had been found in a drawer in Margaret Blackwood's desk. The letter was unsigned but was addressed in the same cryptic handwriting Poirot had seen before. The letter mentioned a deal involving the royal diamond and made references to a third party, with a vested interest in the gem's fate. The language in the letter was vague, but the implications were clear. Whoever was behind this theft was not acting alone, and there were powerful forces at work beyond the Blackwood family's immediate circle. Poirot's instincts told him that the royal diamond was just the beginning. This case had only scratched the surface, and the deeper he dug, the more intricate and dangerous the web of lies became. The following days after Poirot's discovery in Lord William Blackwood's study were filled with tension. The more the detective delved into the lives of the suspects, the more complex the case became. The royal diamond's theft was no longer just about a missing jewel. It was part of something larger, something sinister. As Poirot sat in his study, surrounded by his notes and documents, he could sense the growing weight of the mystery. The stolen diamond had opened a door to a deeper conspiracy, and the trail of lies was becoming more difficult to untangle. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Inspector Hayes entered, his face flushed with anxiety. "Monsieur Poirot, I believe it's time we discuss the latest developments. We've made some progress, but there are still many gaps in the story." Poirot motioned for Hayes to sit, his fingers steepled as he watched the inspector closely. "I am listening, Inspector. What have you discovered?" "The lies begin to unravel." Inspector Hayes placed a series of documents on Poirot's desk. "We've gone through the alibis of all the guests from the night of the theft. Most of them are inconclusive, but there are some inconsistencies. Felicity Blackwood claims she was in the garden at the time of the theft, but the staff say they didn't see her there. Lord William Blackwood's alibi is shaky as well. He claims he was in the drawing room the entire time, but none of the other guests can confirm that." Poirot's sharp eyes flickered to the documents, scanning them quickly. He had already suspected that the Blackwood family was hiding something. Lord William's reluctance to speak openly had troubled him from the very beginning, and Felicity's nervous behavior raised a red flag. Her alibi, it seemed, was falling apart. "What of Sir Edwin?" Poirot asked, his voice calm but probing. "The royal jeweler has his story checked out." Hayes sighed, his face clouding with frustration. "Sir Edwin is a well-respected member of the community, and his alibi seems airtight. He was with several other guests during the theft, and no one has contradicted his version of events. But I'm not convinced. He seems to know more than he's letting on." Poirot nodded, his mind working quickly. "And what of the mysterious man in the dark suit, the one Felicity mentioned during her questioning?" Hayes frowned, shaking his head. "We've spoken to several of the guests, but no one can identify him. He wasn't on the guest list, and no one remembers seeing him leave the event. He was likely a guest who didn't stay for long, but his presence is troubling." Poirot's eyes narrowed. The man in the dark suit seemed like a ghost, an unknown figure who had no clear reason to be there, yet had lingered long enough to see the diamond up close. His role in the theft was still unclear, but Poirot was certain he was part of the puzzle. "I would like to speak with Felicity Blackwood again," Poirot said thoughtfully, his mind already shifting gears. "She may have more to say, and I will need to visit Sir Edwin's workshop. If there is one thing I know about jewelers, it's that they have a deep knowledge of the value of precious stones. Sir Edwin may have knowledge about the diamond that he's not sharing." Uncovering more lies. Poirot's next interview was with Felicity Blackwood. He met her in the same drawing room where they had spoken previously. She seemed more composed this time, but there was still an air of unease about her. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, and her eyes were fixed on the floor, avoiding Poirot's gaze. "Mademoiselle Blackwood," Poirot began, his voice steady but firm, I must ask you to tell me everything you know about the night your aunt was murdered. Your alibi, as you know, has been called into question. The staff did not see you in the garden, as you claim. Felicity's face grew pale, but she lifted her chin, meeting Poirot's gaze for the first time. I swear, Monsieur Poirot was in the garden. I needed some fresh air after the gala. It's true that no one saw me, but that doesn't mean I wasn't there. I didn't want to be near the display case when it was being opened. I didn't want to be associated with the diamond in any way. Poirot studied her closely, noting the tension in her voice. And why is that, mademoiselle? Why did you not want to be near the diamond? What were you so afraid of? Felicity hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with a bracelet on her wrist. I didn't want to be part of the spectacle. My aunt had spent so much time and money on the event. It was supposed to be about charity, about helping people. I didn't want anyone to think I was trying to draw attention to myself or the diamond. Poirot didn't believe her. There was something in her response that didn't match her body language. The lie seemed rehearsed, too careful. I see, Poirot said, his tone calm. And what of Victor Beaulieu? Do you know him? Felicity's eyes widened slightly at the mention of the name, but she quickly recovered. I have heard the name. He's a business associate of my uncle's, I believe, but I've never met him. Poirot watched her closely. Her reaction told him more than her words. She knew more about Beaulieu than she was letting on. Poirot's visit to Sir Edwin's workshop. Poirot's next stop was Sir Edwin's workshop. The royal jeweler had been a figure of respect in the community, and his shop was filled with beautiful jewels and intricate works of art. The air inside was thick with the smell of metal, polishing cloths, and the faint scent of expensive perfume. Sir Edwin was working at his desk when Poirot entered, his concentration unbroken by the detective's arrival. Monsieur Poirot, Sir Edwin greeted him with a slight nod, his hands still working on a delicate piece of jewelry. I trust you're here to discuss the matter of the diamond. Poirot nodded, his eyes scanning the workshop. Indeed, Sir Edwin, I've been reviewing the details of the case, and I believe there are some questions I must ask you regarding the royal diamond. Your alibi has been confirmed, but I would like to understand more about the diamond itself, its value, its origin. Sir Edwin looked up from his work, his eyes narrowing slightly. The royal diamond is one of the most valuable stones in the world, Monsieur Poirot. Its origins go back hundreds of years, but I must confess, I have no personal attachment to it. I was merely there to examine it, as I have with many other royal jewels. Poirot's gaze hardened as he studied Sir Edwin's face. And yet, you seemed to be very interested in its history at the gala, did you not? Sir Edwin faltered for just a moment, his fingers hesitating before returning to their work. As I said, I am a jeweler, Monsieur Poirot. I deal with precious stones every day. It is natural for me to show interest in the royal diamond. Poirot wasn't convinced. There was something in Sir Edwin's tone that suggested a deeper knowledge, a knowledge he wasn't willing to share. Poirot's mind raced as he made a mental note to return to the workshop later and examine the jewelry more closely. The web tightened as the day wore on. Poirot's suspicion grew. Each new lead seemed to open more doors, but the truth remained. Elusive Felicity's strange behavior, Sir Edwin's guarded responses, and the hidden letter had all pointed him toward one conclusion. This was no simple theft. The royal diamond had been stolen, yes, but the theft was part of a larger conspiracy, one that Poirot was determined to unravel that evening. Poirot met with Inspector Hayes again. The detective was eager to discuss the latest findings, but he knew that they still had a long way to go. Inspector Poirot began. I believe we are dealing with something far more complex than we originally thought. I have discovered several inconsistencies, but it is the letter from Victor Beaulieu that I find most troubling. It suggests a connection between the Blackwood family and an outside party, someone with considerable influence. Inspector Hayes nodded slowly, his face lined with concern. What do you suggest we do next? Poirot leaned back, his fingers tapping on his chin. Next, we visit Victor Beaulieu. I believe he is the key to this entire affair. The storm had not yet passed, and London's fog had grown thicker with each passing hour, casting a veil of mystery over Wyndham Manor. The once glorious mansion now felt like a prison of sorts, its grandeur diminished by the recent tragedy. The royal diamond had disappeared without a trace, and the world of high society was in disarray. Every room in the manor seemed to hide secrets, and Hercule Poirot, with his keen intellect, was determined to uncover them all. Poirot had spent the past few days examining the scene of the crime, reviewing the evidence, and questioning the suspects, but he had not yet reached the breakthrough he so desperately needed. Each lead seemed to disappear like smoke. slipping through his fingers. However, Poirot knew that no case was ever as simple as it seemed, and the truth was often hidden in the smallest of details. He had learned to trust his instincts, and right now, his instincts told him there was more to this case than met the eye. It was early morning when Poirot returned to Lord William Blackwood's study, the room where he had discovered the first clue, Margaret Blackwood's cryptic letter. The morning sunlight barely pierced the thick fog outside, and Poirot had a sense of urgency, as if the clock was ticking, and with each passing second the thief had a chance to escape. Poirot entered the study with a sense of quiet purpose. The room was familiar now, each detail etched into his mind: the dark mahogany desk, the towering bookshelves, the ornate fireplace that had been the center of many past conversations. It was all there, untouched by the chaos of the past few days. But Poirot knew there was something more hiding in this room. The key to the mystery was still within reach, and he was determined to find it. He approached the desk once more, this time with a fresh perspective. There was something about the desk that hadn't sat right with him during his previous search. The compartments, the way the drawers had been arranged, it was too neat, almost too perfect for someone who had just experienced a tragedy. Could Lord William have been hiding something? Could there be another layer to the family's history that had been intentionally concealed? Poirot's search for the hidden safe. Poirot's eyes scanned the room with renewed focus. He walked to the far end of the study, where the bookshelves were lined with volumes of law and philosophy. His fingers brushed over the spines of the books, the familiar texture of old leather beneath his fingertips grounding him. But Poirot knew that the answers didn't lie in the books. They were hidden somewhere deeper, beneath the polished veneer of this grand estate. After a few minutes of searching, Poirot's sharp eyes caught something, an imperfection in the woodwork. He ran his fingers along the edge of a shelf, where the grain of the wood seemed slightly different from the rest of the wall. Poirot pressed against it, and with a quiet click, the hidden compartment slid open. His heart quickened as he carefully peered inside. The compartment was small, and the only object inside was an antique silver key, intricately designed and beautifully crafted. Poirot picked it up, turning it over in his hands. There was something about the key that seemed to resonate with him. He had seen a similar design before, though he couldn't quite place where. He held it up to the light, and the engraving on the key became clear. The initials R.B. Poirot's mind raced. The letter from Margaret Blackwood that had been found in her desk had been signed with the same initials. R.B. Was this key, the key to unlocking the mystery? Could it open a safe or hidden compartment somewhere in the manor? Poirot placed the key carefully into his pocket, his mind already formulating his next steps. He turned back to the desk, his eyes scanning the drawers with renewed purpose. There had to be more. The hidden letter from Victor Poirot's search continued as he systematically opened each drawer. The usual documents, letters, receipts, and old correspondence lay scattered across the wooden surfaces. But as Poirot reached the bottom drawer, something different caught his attention. A hidden compartment inside the drawer slid open with ease, revealing a folded letter. It was carefully sealed with a wax stamp, a personal seal he immediately recognized, the crest of Victor Poirot, a name that had already appeared on his radar. Poirot's heart quickened as he carefully opened the letter. The ink was dark and well written, though the letter's contents were cryptic. The diamond must be moved immediately. The plan is in motion, and you will receive what you are owed when it is safely delivered. Do not fail me, or there will be consequences. The letter was unsigned, but the tone was unmistakably threatening. It was clear that Victor Poirot had been involved in the plot, perhaps as a third party pulling the strings. But what was the plan, and what had Lord William's role been in all of this? The letter had made it clear that Lord William was part of something far more dangerous than he had let on. Poirot felt a surge of excitement. This was the breakthrough he had been waiting for. The theft of the royal diamond was only one part of the larger conspiracy. Poirot was not only after the diamond, he was involved in something much darker, something far beyond a simple robbery, a confrontation with Lord William. Blackwood Poirot knew he had to confront Lord William Blackwood once again. The pieces were falling into place, but there was still much to be revealed. The key, the letter, and the cryptic references pointed to something more than just a financial scheme. They pointed to a deeper, more dangerous conspiracy. That evening Poirot arranged for another private meeting with Lord William. He had already uncovered enough to know that the man was hiding something crucial. This time, Poirot would press him for the truth. Lord William sat behind his desk, the same stern expression on his face, though there was a flicker of fear in his eyes as he saw Poirot enter the room. He stood, offering a polite nod. Poirot, Lord William said with forced calm, I trust you've been able to make some headway in this dreadful situation. Poirot did not waste time with pleasantries. He pulled the letter from Victor Beaulieu from his pocket and placed it on the desk in front of Lord William. This letter, my lord, was found in a hidden compartment within your desk. It seems you've been involved in a scheme far darker than simply hosting a charity event. Lord William's face turned pale as he scanned the letter. His eyes widened, and he began to stammer. I don't know what this is. It's not what you think, Poirot. I never intended for this to happen. Poirot's gaze hardened. Explain yourself, my lord. Who is Victor Beaulieu? Why is he threatening you? Lord William's hands trembled slightly as he placed the letter down. Beaulieu was a business partner. We made an arrangement years ago to ensure that Blackwood Estate's future, but it went wrong. He became too powerful, and I couldn't break free of the agreement. He threatened my family if I didn't comply. Poirot leaned in closer, his voice cold. So, you stole the royal diamond. To fulfill this agreement, did you not? You thought it would be enough to keep Beaulieu at bay. Lord William's eyes lowered, and he nodded slowly. Yes, it was my only choice. I didn't think it would come to this. I thought the diamond would be enough to settle everything, but now, it's all gone wrong. The web tightens. Poirot stepped back, taking in the full scope of the situation. Lord William's confession confirmed much of what Poirot had suspected. Beaulieu was the mastermind behind the theft, and Lord William had been coerced into helping him, but there was still so much more to uncover. What was Boulet's true plan, and who else was involved in this web of deceit? Poirot's instincts told him that the royal diamond was not the end of the story. It was simply the beginning. He had found the first clues: a key, the letter, and Lord William's admission. But the criminal network that was operating in the shadows of London was far more complex than anyone could have imagined. As Poirot left Wyndham Manor that night, his thoughts were already racing ahead. He had made progress, but the investigation was far from over. With each new clue, the web of lies and conspiracy grew thicker. Poirot knew that the answers lay within the tangled relationships between Lord William Beaulieu and the Blackwood family, but the more he uncovered, the more dangerous the truth became.